checks, and then we'll get into Faulty Logic Fridays. All right, all we need to do is make sure YouTube catches up a little bit, and we will be there. We just need to start on the other end because I'm just talking to hear my voice. And I see I misspelled shortly in that particular message. Let's remove that. All right, looks like we're good there. Second thing we need to check is make sure our sound is playing on the video. All right, looks like we are good. So let's just make sure everything is set up back end, and we will get into this. Now, if you do not know who I am, let's start with introducing myself. I am the Mad Computer Scientist, and normally I talk about math, computer science, and tech topics that interest me, but every Friday I do something a little different, and I do it live. It's called Faulty Logic Fridays. Here we're going to take a look at another video, and I'm inviting you, the viewer, to point out the logical fallacies in the video, and this is important because I'm not perfect either, to point out the logical fallacies I am using. Tonight we're going to look at Spirit Science's Sacred Geometry video. Now, I honestly don't know much about Jordan, the guy who runs Spirit Science. I know he has a problematic history, and I also know he says a lot of bizarre things, and I was introduced to him, as were many of you, by the YouTuber Martimer81. I also don't know much about sacred geometry, but I thought, hey, I need to relearn some geometry I've forgotten since 10th grade, so I thought maybe we'll take a look at it. Will that geometry be useful here? Will I regret not remembering what I've forgotten? Or will it be totally unrelated and just assigning meaning to vague shapes, which seems to be most of what I've seen from Spirit Science? But before we get into that, I'd like everyone to please remember to like the video, comment on the video if you find it useful, and if you're going to subscribe, be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you'll always get videos when they drop. Now, let us begin. And hold on, I need to start back over. My fault. Okay, who says consciousness is in the superstition box? Consciousness is still something we debate the nature of, so we can see right there, you're already wrong. Also, what does this have to do with geometry? And going back to the beginning of this video, I believe about half of his disclaimer. Do not believe anything you see on Spirit Science. Wait, we've proven the paranormal to be real? Exactly when have we done that? Jordan, are you just assuming that you've already proven something? Because that would be the begging the question fallacy. No, consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, not part of the brain. It's something that arises from the way the brain works. If we could come up with a sufficiently advanced AI, we might be able to come up with an AI that we would consider conscious or at least it would act in all and meaningful ways as if it were conscious. And that's really all there is to it. I do believe noetics is a pseudoscience, and I have not heard about the other guy. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Are not Jordan, but I should not nitpick your grammar. That is relatively innocuous. My cat Athena says hi to everyone. Who is preventing us from discussing consciousness? Oh, goody, this is what we came here for. So basically, I'm going to look at some pretty shapes, maybe review a bit of grade school geometry, and you're going to make vague connections that don't have anything to do with what you're actually talking about? I'm disappointed. I was hoping for more. That is loud in my ear. We don't know if the universe is infinite, or at least our current instantiation of space time, which is what most people mean when they say the universe. I believe many physicists have been over this one before, but you're actually misrepresenting what the Big Bang is. The Big Bang is not an explosion, it's a rapid expansion of space. Yes, because there is certainly only one creation myth that has ever existed anywhere, Jordan. The two circles of a Venn diagram are mortal enemies? I'm really hoping I misunderstood what he was trying to say there. Yes, we all know what the Fibonacci sequence is. Energy is the capacity to do work, as many people have pointed out to you before. I'm so glad he's connected this to Taoism somehow, because I'm not sure what this has to do with Taoism. But again, I don't know everything. Maybe there's some book I haven't read out there where someone can show me that Jordan is actually correctly identifying Taoist principles here, but I suspect he's basically using some new age mumbo jumbo that he's come up with and connecting it to ancient Eastern philosophies, something that happens quite a bit. Oh my gosh, Jordan, did you even think about that statement before you said it? Baking is chemistry. Things have to be put together a certain way, or you will not get anything close to the desired results. There may be some wiggle room, but baking is not a creative process. No, I need to correct you there. The story of neither movie made much sense. But at least Sucker Punch had better visuals. All right, we'll continue. Wait, what? That is some impressive word salad. I can't even come up with a logical fallacy there. They're just not connected. This is a meaningless phrase. How about we understand what statistical averages are and not assume this is true for every single male and every single female? The male body, or what people would consider to be male bodies, in general are, as you put it, blockier, and the feminine bodies are generally more curved. However, as many people will point out to you, and it's important to point this out during Pride Month, sex is not a strict binary, and certainly neither is gender. If you want actual gender binaries, you need to stick to computer science, math, and logic where they actually exist. Oh, great. What happened? Ooh, that was weird. I didn't learn much about human anatomy in ninth grade biology. In 10th grade, I took chemistry. And of course, in 11th grade, I took advanced biology. I'm thinking you might have been a little behind on your sciences, Jordan, or it just could have been different in your particular high school, depending on the order they had it laid out. What is a geometric scale exactly? Wait, what? That's weird. Are you sure? All right, let me check. It was working on my end, so what happened?
What we're going to be looking at today is the pattern of creation. Essentially, what this means is that everything in the universe comes out of this single
All right, can you hear it now?
pattern. I'm not making this up. This single image will change everything. When I mentioned in lesson 5,
Oh, I think I understand what I did. Let's try.
change everything. When I mentioned in lesson 5
Okay, yes, it does seem to be working now. Let's
that
continue.
the ancient Egyptians and even more ancient civilizations knew about a deeper, basic understanding of the universe, this is the flower of life, and it is also the creation pattern of everything in existence.
No, it's just 19 overlapping circles. It's nice, it's pretty looking, but that's all it is.
Even non-tangible things, emotions, thoughts, music in its entire spectrum, everything comes from this image.
Wait, everything comes from that image? No, it doesn't. Nothing comes from that image other than a few pleasant things to look at.
Okay, so there are 13 information systems that comes out of the flower of life. Today, I'm going to show
13 information systems? Are you telling me the flower of life is Turing complete? I'd like to see a proof of that one.
you how physical reality can manifest itself, which is just one of the 13 systems. In future lessons, we will look at more. It's also important to note that
Is physical reality really an information system? Yeah, parts of it are, so I won't dispute that
at
one.
first it may not make sense. I ask that
At first, it may not make sense. It doesn't make sense after you've watched it all the way to the end, I'm suspecting, either.
you do not choose immediately to shut this out, and just watch with an open mind, and try and see this in a new way. Also, I want to tell you that by learning about sacred geometry simply by observing, you are absorbing only a very minuscule amount of information. If you really want to learn more, you must begin to draw it yourself. I kid you not, when you do this, you begin to see things in a new way. You begin to understand why things are done in the way that they are done. Promise. The flower of life was known around the world in ancient times. It was found in Ireland, Turkey, Israel, Egypt, China, Greece, Germany, India, and Iceland. It's also been recorded to have been found in England, Tibet, Japan, Sweden, Lapland, the Yucatan, and I think 14 other places. This thing is everywhere. Not only that, but
You think 14 other places? You mean you don't actually know? I wish I had time to fact check this because I suspect this is false.
everywhere around the world it has the same name, the flower of life. Now, to understand the flower of life, first we have to talk about how it's formed. This could get incredibly complex, so I'll try and keep it simple. Imagine consciousness, or spirit, floating in a void, which means it's nothingness, and then spirit. No physical body or mind, just spirit, and that's it. Then blackness, essentially nothing, all around the spirit, for infinite. Spirit decides to do something, so it expands its consciousness all around itself as far as it can go without moving. It creates a sphere around itself. This is the first circle in the flower of life. Then, spirit has an awareness of what's around itself in 360 degrees. It moves to the very edge of the sphere anywhere and repeats what it did the first time. It creates this image, which also creates the Vesica Pisces. Within the Vesica Pisces is a vast and incredible amount of knowledge about width, proportion, depth. Also comes the square roots of 2, 3, and 5, which are all numbers that go on forever. But even more interesting,
Congratulations, Jordan. You've discovered what is basically the unit circle, which is not the flower of life. Also, I agree. Learning how to do math is helped by doing math. Drawing things will not give us some sort of spiritual insight, usually. At least not without chemical help.
interestingly, comes geometric information about light. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, spirit has no choice but to do it again. Spirit is flawless, and therefore it will move flawlessly, creating the next circle either here or here, exactly one radius away from the other circle next to it. Every time spirit moves another sphere, more and more knowledge comes out of the image that is created. The first complete image to be formed is
More and more knowledge? Knowledge of what?
this. It has two names, the seed of life, or the Genesis pattern, and for good reason. Now, let's look at the book of Genesis for a second. Each of these movements, or creations of circles, can be seen as another day. On the first movement, the second sphere, it created knowledge about not only mathematical proportions, but light. The first sentence of Genesis says, the earth was without form and void, and that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. In the very next sentence, God says, let there be light. The key here is in the order. The movement happened first, then light happened immediately after. Well, but what about the waters? Well, you have to remember, the Bible has been
Thank you for the Bible lesson, Jordan. Let's skip it.
changed over time a lot. The ancient Egyptians would say that the way our modern Bibles begin creation is impossible, especially if you think about it from a physics point of view. Imagine a dark, infinite space that goes on forever and ever in all directions. You're just floating there with nothing. You can't really fall, but where would you fall to? From a purely physics or mathematical point of view, motion itself, or kinetic energy, is absolutely impossible in a void. You can't even rotate, because motion cannot become real unless there's one other object in the space around you. So the ancient Egyptians would
Wait, how is motion impossible in a void? Oh, if you mean there's nothing there, yeah, there's nothing there to move. Do you mean in a vacuum where it absolutely is possible?
say that before God moved upon the face of the waters, it would first have to create something to move relative to. So, Genesis pattern, after 3 spheres, you get the Holy Trinity. Another interesting one, it says in many Bibles of the world, not just the Christian Bible, that on the 4th day of Genesis, exactly 1/2 of creation was completed. Starting from the first motion, exactly 1/2 of the circles were formed on the 4th day.
In many Bibles, not just the Christian one? Uh, Jordan, I'm pretty sure that only the Christians call that book the Bible. Now, you could say that the Old Testament is the Jewish Bible, but they have different words for it, and what they use isn't the different forms of the Christian Bibles, which there's more than one of, that the Christians use.
5th day of Genesis, 6th circle, more information, and then on the 6th day, a geometric miracle takes place. The last circle forms a complete 6-petaled flower. This is what
Great, you've drawn a hex sign, Jordan. I can assign a random meaning to it too. I can say that, that hex sign stands for good luck. It doesn't mean anything other than what we assign to it.
many earlier Bibles meant when they said, in the beginning there were 6. Our Bible even said creation was formed in 6 days, and this fits exactly. This is the pattern of Genesis, and so it's called the Genesis pattern. It's also the beginning of the creation of the universe that we live in. These original movements of spirit are really important, but now let's look at something even cooler. Another image that comes out of this pattern is this. It's called the Tree of Life. Many may recognize this as the Jewish or Hebrew Kabbalah, but the Kabbalah did not originate this image, and there's proof. The Tree of Life does not belong to any culture, not even the Egyptians, who carved the Tree of Life on 2 sets of 3 pillars at Karnak Temple, Luxor, over 5,000 years ago.
No, I'm pretty sure the Kabbalah is specifically Jewish.
It's outside any race or religion, as with all of these images. They are patterns that are intimately connected.
The fact that other religions also have something like the world tree Yggdrasil does not mean that the Kabbalah is not Jewish. It just means that the idea of a world tree or a tree of life is something that occurs outside of Judaism.
With nature. You'll also notice that every circle on the Tree of Life is either the length or width of the Vesica Pisces. The second image beyond Genesis in the Flower of Life is the Egg of Life. This is formed during the second vortex motion. Upon its completion, it creates an image like this, a 3-dimensional shape that you can hold in your hand. If you were to connect their centers, you would see a cube. So what? Who cares? Well, the ancient Egyptians did, because they were concerned with creation, life, and death. They called this cluster of spheres the Egg of Life. You probably won't believe me just yet, but this shape is the morphogenic structure that created your body. Your entire physical existence is dependent on the Egg of Life structure, and everything about you was created from that form.
Jordan, we all start from a single cell.
Everything from your eye color to how long your fingers are, this is a whole lesson on its own, so let's move on for now. All around the world, the flower of life was always made the exact same way. See, this pattern can clearly go on forever. However, they always stopped after 19 circles. Why? Well, because they didn't want you to see what I'm about to show you. Back then...
Oh, great. I was hoping we would get to a conspiracy theory. I do believe more math proofs need conspiracy theories, which I found out after someone tried to prove that 1 times 1 equals 2, and as part of his proof, he said the Anunnaki sky people gave us incorrect math.
This image and knowledge was so sacred that they couldn't allow it to become common knowledge. It was appropriate at that time. However, now we either use the information or fall further into darkness. In biology, all cells have a zona pellucida around the edge. These circles around the flower of life are the zona pellucida of the flower of life. You must remove these. Then...
Zona pellucida? Do you mean a cell membrane? Because yes, all cells have a cell membrane, at least the ones I'm aware of. Some cells, especially plant cells and fungal cells, have a cell wall.
Complete the spheres that were cut off by the zona pellucida. With one more step, you'll have the secret. Finish the drawing, add the final missing circles, giving you this. This image is the fruit of life. This pattern of 13 circles is one of the holiest, most sacred forms in existence. It's called the fruit because it is the result, the fruit, from which the fabric of the details of the reality were created. Remember when we talked about male and female energy, lesson 4? As you can see, this image is female. It has no straight lines. However, when you combine male lines with these female circles, something amazing happens. What you do is draw a straight line from the very center of every single circle to every other circle in this image. When you do this, you get an image which is known throughout the universe, everywhere, as Metatron's cube. It is one of the most important informational systems in the universe, one of the basic creation patterns in existence.
Okay, he keeps using the phrase information system, and He doesn't know what that is, so let's look it up and give everyone a definition. Give me a second here. I'm going to mute my microphone so you don't me typing on my keyboard.
So what is Metatron's cube? Well, anyone who has studied sacred geometry, or even regular geometry for that matter, knows that there are 5 unique shapes in the universe, and that they are crucial to understanding both regular and sacred geometry. They are called the Platonic solid.
Okay, let's come back to the information systems definition, because as you suspect, he doesn't know what one is. An information system is any data processing system, either manual or computerized. This is not it. These are shapes. Any telecommunication system whose primary function is to transmit and/or display data. These are not telecommunication systems. Again, Jordan, these are shapes. System consisting of the network of all communication channels used within an organization. So there's no organization here unless the shapes have somehow gotten together and formed some way to communicate and tell their happy shape stories.
A Platonic solid has certain characteristics by definition. First of all of its faces are the same size. For example, a cube, the most well-known Platonic solid, has a square on every face, so all of its faces are the same size. Secondly, the edges of the Platonic solids are all the same length. All edges of the cube are the same length. Third, it only has one size of interior angles between the faces. In the case of the cube, this angle is 90 degrees. And fourth, when put inside of a sphere, all of the points will touch the edge of the sphere perfectly. With that definition, there are only 4 shapes besides the cube that fit that description. So what are they? Well, we have the dodecahedron, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the isosahedron, and the hexahedron. All of these shapes are found within Metatron's cube. This knowledge is also where original alchemy came from. The ancient alchemists and great souls like Pythagoras, father of Greece, considered each shape to have an elemental aspect to them.
Was Pythagoras an alchemist? I don't think he was. Pythagoras was a philosopher and a mathematician, and he did found a cult, but I don't think he was into alchemy.
The tetrahedron was considered fire, the cube was earth, the octahedron was air, the isosahedron was water, and the dodecahedron was ether. Ether, also known as prana, and tachyon energy are all the same thing. They extend anywhere and are accessible at any...
Tachyon energy? A tachyon is a hypothetical particle that moves faster than light, and any experiment that has been done to try to find one has failed, and many physicists believe that a faster than light particle cannot exist because it violates the known laws of physics.
Point in space, time, and dimension. This is the great secret of zero-point technology. The sphere is voidness. These 6 elements are the building blocks of the universe, and they create the qualities of the universe. To summarize, this is the first informational system that comes out of the fruit of life through Metatron's cube.
If you recall what I mentioned earlier, this is not an information system in any way.
In alchemy, they rarely discussed ether. I've read that in the Pythagorean school, if you even uttered the word dodecahedron outside of the school, they would kill you on the spot. That's how sacred this shape was. 200 years later, when Plato was alive, he would discuss it, but only very carefully. This is because the dodecahedron is near the outer edge in your energy field, and is the highest form of consciousness. There's quite a bit more here, but I don't think I...
Wait, the dodecahedron is the highest form of consciousness. It's a hypothetical idealized shape. How is it conscious in any way?
can go much further on it right now. Anyways, recognize this? The periodic table of elements? Every single element on this table has a geometric relation to one of these 5 shapes. Modern scholars ridiculed this idea until the 1980s, when Professor Robert Moon at the University of Chicago demonstrated that the entire periodic table of elements, literally everything in the physical world, is based on these same 5 forms. In fact,
I actually believe someone who has a better background in physics and chemistry debunked this, and unsurprisingly, it's wrong.
throughout modern physics, chemistry, and biology, the sacred geometric patterns of creation are being rediscovered. Another example is the egg of life that I showed you earlier. Hopefully that will help you to understand just how incredible and important of a discovery this truly is. We have 5 Platonic geometries that form everything in creation, but we don't have a hexagonal shape. If we look at the flower of life, we see that its ultimate basic form is in a 6-pointed shape, called a hexagon. Want to see where else hexagons form in life?
The polar regions of Saturn? Okay, Jordan, so far only one of those is a hexagon? I have no idea if those are hexagons. Okay, yes, those are hexagons. My gosh, is his music annoying.
We have all of these hexagons, and yet there is no platonic solid that is formed with a hexagon. So what gives? Well, I want to introduce the vector equilibrium, which was coined by Buckminster Fuller. It is actually formed from three two-dimensional hexagons that swivel around each other, and its basic shapes that make it up are an equilateral triangle and the square. These are the two smallest shapes that you can make with straight lines, and together they balance at each other's corners to create the perfect shape. Why is it the perfect shape? The reason is that every single line which is connected in this shape is the same distance away from every other point, including the very center of the shape itself. Not even the platonic solids have that definition, which also makes this...
So you're saying it's a hexagonal shape, a hexagonal three-dimensional object, not composed of any hexagons. Good job there, Jordan.
The most stable shape and polyhedron, and the basis of the three-dimensional flower of life. Finally, the only reason it's not a platonic solid is because it has both squares and triangles within it. Platonic solids are platonic because each face is the same, which makes me think that other shapes must exist that are balanced between two different shapes as well, and construct everything in the universe. Now, in the comments or end credits, depending on where you're watching this, I posted links to a TED Talks video by Garrett Lacey, a particle physicist who tells us of an amazing discovery in the scientific field. I want to show you and talk about his findings, and then we'll look at dimensions.
I think you understood it about as well as I would, if that. Jordan, neither of us is a physicist.
After that. Okay, so Garrett has discovered that by examining coral, they found that each coral head has thousands of different polyps. These polyps are constantly budding and branching into...
Okay, let's take a few seconds out here so I can say hello to the people I see. Hello, Aries. Hello, Pragmatic Crystal. And hello, Spooky Bedhair.
Genetically identical neighbors. Through performing heat experiments on these polyps, they were able to find that every single polyp is part of a whole, a single unit of being, but each one is experiencing its own reality individually. From their findings with the coral, they were able to look at quantum mechanics. See, the mathematics of quantum mechanics shows us exactly how our universe works, and we see that everything in the reality is just continuing.
Wait, what? I'm sorry, when exactly did we actually find a way to unify general relativity with quantum mechanics? I mean, I know Terence Howard thinks he's found the grand unified field equation, which apparently is 1 times 1 equals 2, but no, he hasn't. And quantum mechanics is still known to be incompatible with general relativity. The scales of the very small do not translate to the scales of the very large.
Continually branching into new possibilities, just like the coral. As humans, we are individually experiencing only one of these possibilities, much like the individual polyps. What physics is telling us is that everything comes down to geometry and the interactions between elementary particles. Things can happen only when things are perfectly balanced.
Really, even for things that don't have a geometry like light.
So Garrett starts showing us some subatomic particles and the things that make up electrons and protons and neutrons. We always consider these to be the smallest particle, but we never think about what's creating them.
Have we always thought of them to be the smallest particles? I don't actually know. I do know we think of things that are smaller than electrons and protons now, and we know that these subatomic particles can be broken into smaller particles.
Demonstrates to us how the particles that create point particles really work. He shows that when you plot them out in how they move, this is what they look like. At the tiniest scales of the universe and how it works is very beautiful. Now, look at this. This is one of the ways that these charges branch off from each other. As you can see, it flows in a hexagonal pattern, the same pattern that we found
Hexagonal, Jordan.
in the expanded flower of life. Then, if you rotate this pattern in 6-dimensional charge space, you see it forms yet another pattern. Many of you will recognize this as the shape of the Star of David, but its true name is the star tetrahedron, which maps perfectly over the fruit of life. This entire pattern created by the particle...
Great. If you draw a shape over another shape you intended to draw a shape over, you can draw a shape over that shape.
Is mapped across over precise places on a 200-dimensional spherical shape scientists have called E8, of which also has a geometric shape. By rotating that shape as well, you can see how there are nearly...
You mean something that can be represented as a geometric shape has a geometric shape? Wow! I think you should go publish that somewhere.
Infinite possibilities as to how these elementary particles interact with each other. The details of the reality begin to take form. Now, as this shape is rotating in 8 dimensions, you can see a myriad of different patterns here. Look at this one in particular. This looks a lot like Metatron's cube, doesn't it? At the heart of particle physics is pure, beautiful geometry. By now, you probably can begin to see where sacred geometry falls into this. Where do these shapes originate? Do they just come into being at random? Or does the first shape come from somewhere else? In Lesson 6, we talked about the flower of life, the original, perfect geometric symmetry that created the universe. This shape, as we learned...
Alright, we know it didn't create the universe, we know no geometric shape created anything, and we certainly know that the universe was not created by a spirit drawing circles as you suggested earlier.
Is not only the root of all mathematical proportion, light, the platonic solids, but is also the source of every musical system in the universe, including systems both used and unknown to modern man. It is also the source of energy patterns and, well, everything. It all comes from the flower of life. I believe this is what is at the heart of what's forming every subatomic particle formation, and it probably goes at least a few levels deeper than what Garrett is showing us.
Okay, Jordan, I'm going to introduce 3 words to you that will revolutionize your life. They are, I don't know. I'm looking through this and I have to say, I don't even know enough about quantum physics to know why you're wrong. It sounds wrong to me. I would suspect if I asked a physicist trying to explain this, they would just laugh at the whole thing. Because a lot of us are specialists in certain fields.
Phi, also known as the golden ratio or golden mean, is a very simple relationship. If you had a rod and were going to put a mark on it, only 2 places would mark the phi ratio, which is here or here. The length of A plus B is equal to the length of C. This ratio is 1.6180339 and continues on.
Oh my gosh, what another amazing mathematical discovery. If you break a rod into 2 parts of a certain ratio, if you add those 2 parts of that ratio together, you get the length of the whole.
On forever. If you multiply the length of C with phi, it will create the exact same image, only bigger. C and D is equal to E. This ratio could then span on forever, going smaller and smaller or bigger and bigger.
Yes, and the point you're going to get to is this will give us the Fibonacci sequence, essentially.
Forever. This ratio is infinite. It has no beginning and no end. It is also believed that phi is the mathematical root of all other sequences. See,
Wait, what? Phi is the mathematical root of all other sequences. Are you sure about that, Jordan? Because I almost certainly am not. I'm going to let this video play again while I look that up.
Mathematical sequence in existence needs a minimum of 3 numbers to figure out the sequence. Phi only needs 2. It is the only one. Similar to how the circle and square are the source of all shapes, but we'll get to that later on. The next thing that you need to know is that this ratio is found in all life everywhere. Sort of. By sort of, I mean it's really Fibonacci, but we'll look at that in a moment. Look at your hand. Not only does each finger have its own ratio moving up each finger, which is phi to the next bone, but it oscillates back and forth from the tallest finger to the thumb. You wonder why the human hand is like that? It's based on phi. This relationship is found throughout the body in various ways, moving up the arms and legs, in your face, throughout the entire body. This is a Greek statue that accurately represents this.
Okay, not to keep everyone in suspense, but Jordan is apparently pulling the whole phi ratio being the root of all other mathematical sequences out of his posterior. Now, it is a nice geometric sequence, or not, it's not a geometric sequence. It is a nice sequence, but it's not the root of all of them.
The Greeks were very precise when they made their art, because they understood phi, Fibonacci, and the importance of these sequences. When the Romans took over Greece, you could see the perfection in statues just completely disappear. I'm not saying the Romans were bad artists. They just didn't measure everything to the same caliber that the Greeks did. Here is the phi ratio in butterflies. You can see this ratio everywhere, from the wing size to the body to the antennas. They're all phi ratios. Here's dragonflies. It's the same story. Phi runs along the entire body, and the relation to the body and the wings. Here it is in frogs. Phi is found throughout the body in relation to the head, to the arms, to the fingers, and so on. Well, what about fish? You'd think they wouldn't be found in fish. Well, here's 3 kinds of fish. Once again,
I'm sure for every example you're showing, I can find dozens of other examples where this ratio doesn't hold.
the ratios are consistent. It doesn't just apply to these creatures, though. Regardless of what mammal, insect, avian, plant, or living creature of any kind, you will find this ratio one way or another. There's a reason for this, but we'll get to that.
Well, if you're looking for something with the express intent of finding it, generally you're going to find it.
In a moment. Let me show you the importance we used to place on this golden ratio. In ancient times, we built many structures based on phi because we understood divine proportion. This is the pagoda of Yakushiji Temple in Japan. It's built with these same mathematics, from the doorway to the ball on top of the temple. It is a structural embodiment of the proportions that all life holds. The Parthenon.
Hold on, let's look up apophenia because I've heard that recently and I think that is relevant here. All right. So for those of you who don't know, apophenia is the perception of or belief in connectedness among unrelated phenomena. Yep, that's Jordan.
Parthenon in Greece also has the exact same mathematical structure, but even more. I recommend watching Nova's Secrets of the Parthenon if you wish to learn more about this, because the stuff that they find is really cool. The Great Pyramid in Giza
Okay, I actually agree with Jordan on something. A lot of the Nova stuff is available for free on YouTube. So if you want to actually look up the documentary he just mentioned, you can do that.
Also has these proportions. They're incredibly precise, perfect in every way. You'd think that
Let's go back there and double check something because he actually showed us some math. Give me a bit more here. Have we found it yet?
building these structures using the logical and mathematical proportions so carefully that they would hinder the creativity behind these buildings, but they really don't. In fact, the left brain understanding all of this can even enhance creativity if used correctly. It makes me wonder about all of the world-famous buildings of the modern world. Could phi be a large factor in what makes them stand out?
Well, Jordan, math is important to architecture and engineering. You might want to try some actual math and find out.
Let's move on to our next sequence, which is called Fibonacci. Now, the Fibonacci sequence is life's way of creating the golden mean. Allow me to explain. This sequence is continually made from adding the previous number to the current. 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 1 is 3, 3 and 2 is 5,
Yes, it's a recursive relation.
5 and 3 is 8. You can see how it continues. Now, what most people don't know about Fibonacci is that it actually continually strives closer and closer to the phi ratio. By dividing the current number into the last, you can see this happening. 1 into 1 is 1. Well, that's not close at all. 2 into 1 is 2. This time it's over 5, but closer. 3 into 2 is 1.5, which is under, but closer still. 5 into 3 is 1.666. This time it's over, but even closer. Continuing with that, it's 1.6, and then 1.625, 1.615384, 1.61904.
Yes, and we use a lot of things like this to calculate a lot of things. For example, there's a sequence I used to write a Python program to calculate the value of pi. It's just something we can use to calculate this ratio.
Or 8, and so on. It continually oscillates over and under the phi ratio, never quite making it there, but continuing on closer and closer every time, until eventually you can't even tell the difference. Because phi is an infinite number, this sequence will go on forever. Let's look at some spirals in nature, another way.
Phi is not an infinite number. Phi has a particular value. It is an irrational number with an infinite number of digits. It is not infinite. Its value is phi. I know you probably don't understand that when mathematicians use things like that, they usually mean the exact value, but that's because you've never actually studied anything beyond apparently 7th grade math.
Way that phi and Fibonacci can manifest. This is a Nautilus shell. Many people will say it's phi, but it's really Fibonacci. See how when it's in its earliest form, it's crude, not smooth or anything? One look and you can tell that's not phi. But as it goes up farther and farther, it gets closer and closer to phi. It becomes a nearly perfect phi spiral by the time it's all the way out here. This also happens with sunflowers, pine cones, and many plants in nature. In many cases, such as the pine cones and sunflowers, it flows in a double spiral or more, much like the spiraling arms of a galaxy. From the microcosm to the macrocosm, spirals are always present. So phi is basically source, or spirit, or God, in a mathematical way of thinking.
Oh my gosh, I thought I dealt with the last person who equated math to God when I did the Redeemed Zoomer video. But no, phi is just a number. It's a ratio. It's like pi. It is not God.
The math of God. Don't forget that this sequence is an intimate part of nature itself. I'm going to call it source. It is the source of all mathematical sequences, and all life in existence grows based on phi.
I would like a source for you claiming it's the source of all mathematical sequences. I mean, after all, mathematical sequences are just things we come up with. The source, if there is one, is the human mind.
However, phi has no beginning and no end. Life doesn't know how to deal with that. It's like source says, go and replicate this, and life says, we don't
Do you mean phi has a specific value that is irrational?
know how. Because life doesn't know how to create from something that has no beginning. So it creates the Fibonacci sequence instead, which has a beginning, but starts out crude, very basic, and then continually
Wait, what? Are you saying life does math?
goes closer.
Oh, technically life does math, but it has to reach a certain level of consciousness so it can understand abstract thought first.
And closer to source, becoming more divine every step. It does take steps too, which actually has quite a bit to do with evolution. Let's move on for now though. The only other sequence you need to know for this is binary sequences. This is a sequence like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. We're just
Those are the powers of 2. If you're going to say binary sequence to someone with a computer science degree, they're going to think about something radically different. And the fact that it's 2 to the first, 2 squared, 2 to the third, 2 to the fourth, 2 to the fifth, 2 to the sixth, 2 to the seventh, and 2 to the eighth, really isn't all that impressive.
Doubling the last number instead of adding it to the previous one. We're all very familiar with this. Binary sequences are found in life as well. For example, mitotic cell divisions are binary. We go from being a single cell being to having over 100 trillion cells in only 46.
Oh my gosh, learn what words mean. Binary means there are only two options. What you're trying to say is that cells reproduce exponentially.
Divisions. Binary sequences are also how computers work, by turning on and off chips. Computing at its core, anyways, is binary. This is how a polar graph usually looks, with 36 radial lines in 10-degree increments representing the 360 degrees. Then, concentric circles are drawn, each with the same distance away as the last, creating 8 equal demarcations as the one before, counting the inside circle as 1. Think about what this represents too. It's a two-dimensional drawing of a three-dimensional sphere, one of the sacred forms, by projecting it onto a flat surface. This is also called the shadow form, and casting shadows is a sacred way to obtain information. Also, a polar graph has
Passing shadows is a sacred way to obtain information?
both straight, male lines, and circular, female lines, both male and female energies.
Since when do geometric shapes have gender?
Interacting at
And are you assuming they're gender, Jordan?
once. If you plot a golden mean spiral at 0 degrees on the polar graph, it will loop all the way around before hitting 0 again, exactly at the 8th circle. You'll find that this golden mean line crosses 5 specific places as it goes out. These places are where the female circular lines meet the male lines. It crosses at 120 degrees, 190 degrees, 240 degrees, 280 degrees, and then it jumps to 360, or back at 0, depending on how you look at it. What's interesting about this is that it creates both a binary and Fibonacci sequence. Looking at the radial increments from the center,
Exponential! You're going to give me a headache if you keep misusing that word.
crosses at 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8. Well, that's Fibonacci. But it also crosses at 2, 4, and 8. Well, that's a binary sequence. We're going to look at the binary sequence in particular, though, because what you find is very cool. If you draw lines from the outermost circles on the lines where the binary sequence was formed, you get this image. It is an equilateral triangle. If you continue the spiral outward, it would continue to hit these exact same places and continue to form larger equilateral triangles.
And that's supposed to be interesting how?
Let's divert yet again to look at something very interesting. There was a man named Keith Critchlow who discovered something very important.
I would love for you to look at something interesting, Jordan. I'd like you to go back to that math with the pyramid so I can see if you did the Pythagorean theorem correctly.
To understanding the geometry of music. First, he drew a straight line through an equilateral triangle, and then he measured from the middle of the center line and drew a straight line up to the top edge and back down to the bottom corner. Then he did the same, but passed through the center line of the top and back down again. He did this yet again on the other side. You can keep doing this on either side as well. By drawing this funny little form, he discovered something of great importance. He writes, continuing in this way, each successive proportion will be the harmonic mean between the previous proportion and the total length, and all of these proportions will be musically significant. 1/2 being the octave, 2/3 being the fifth, 4/5 being the major third, 8/9 being the major tone or step, and 16/17 being the half tone or step. In other words, he discovered the geometries of music, or at least one aspect of them. Then he tried measuring it in a different way, starting at a different point of the center line.
So what you're telling me is he found a way to represent musical concepts with a geometric shape. Great.
3/4, he found the measurements were 1/7, 1/4, 2/5, 4/7, 8/11, and 16/19. All of these numbers are musically significant. This is very interesting. It means that the harmonics of music are somehow related to the proportions of the central line moving through a tetrahedron. Back to the polar graph.
Wait, what?
You can see that this drawing has a much greater value
Sometimes, Jordan, coincidences are just coincidences.
all of a sudden. Not only that, but it becomes even easier to make your measurements thanks to the polar.
So basically, there is a name for this logical fallacy. I can't remember what it is, where you just draw conclusions between unrelated things and try to assign significance to it.
graph itself. You can just draw a straight line through the drawing on the graph, and it will give you the center line. This information has been taken
I hope, Spooky, that someday you become as spiritual as your shadow.
light years beyond what I just showed you, though. A research team found that you can draw these lines not only from the center, but from any nodal points inside the upper half of the triangle, and you will come up with all known harmonics in existence. Basically, this means that anywhere the straight line and curved lines on the polar graph cross from 0 to 120 degrees and start making the pattern, you will come up with all known harmonic systems. Not only the Western keyboard, but the Eastern, and even many unknown systems that have never been used. As I'm not a musician, there's not much more I can show you related to this, but I would love to see what a
Well, that makes two of us, Jordan, because I have no idea if what you're saying here is true or not either.
musician could really do with this knowledge. Remember when we talked about spirals in nature? They often travel in two.
What could a musician do with this knowledge? Musician's primary job is to write and play music.
Usually this is male and female. So on this polar graph, if you're going to copy nature, you don't just plot one spiral, you have to plot two. When you do that, it gives you this image, which is a star tetrahedron inside of a sphere. We mentioned this in lesson 7, and this image is more commonly known as the Star of David. Do you remember the face on Mars? NASA obviously tells
The face on Mars is a well-known case of pareidolia. It was also proven not to be a face when our camera technology improved and we have better resolution and their different geographic features.
us that it's just a random formation on the surface of the planet. But right next to the face, there are also a few pyramids and other anthropomorphic structures. I know what you're
Again, these are all artifacts of lower resolution cameras.
thinking. Why on earth would I bring that up all of a sudden? Well,
Because you're looking for connections where none exist? That's what I would think.
Richard Hoagland and his colleagues have spent a long time researching and deciphering a message on the surface of the
Oh, I was hoping we would get back to someone I used to listen to on Art Bell.
red planet. Want to know what that message was? It was a star tetrahedron inscribed in a sphere. Holy balls, right? It's pretty crazy and very eye-opening now that we have this information about what this really means.
Except, what we know is that we had bad cameras when those photographs were taken, and we know now that with higher quality imaging, we have a better idea of what is actually there, and it is not a face, nor is it a pyramid.
Inside the star tetrahedron, another one fits perfectly. We can continue to put more and more star tetrahedrons inside or
Oh my gosh, if you scale down a shape and fit it inside another shape, you can repeat that process?
outside of the other star tetrahedrons, the same way the golden mean spiral can wrap around the polar graph infinitely big or infinitely small. You'll notice that this smaller tetrahedron also happens to fit perfectly around this sphere. Well, check this out. If you put this same size sphere centered on the point of every single star tetrahedral point, guess what suddenly reveals itself?
Oh my gosh, we've drawn shapes over other shapes.
Fruit of life. It's back.
Thank you for sharing the Sephiroth chorus with us, for those of us who missed the original Final Fantasy VII.
According to the Egyptians, this is one of the holiest, most sacred forms in existence. Of course, we already learned one of its informational systems in Lesson 6, and what you just saw was the second, only in reverse order. What this means is that all of the information of music, harmonics, sound, and spirals come out of this image. Not only that, but light and the dimensional levels work in the same way as harmonics, which we've already discussed in Lesson.
The only way I can think in which they're similar is that sound does have frequency as does light.
2, 7, and 9, meaning that the geometric information about light and dimensions are also related to this star tetrahedron pattern. So what you just saw was the second unraveling from the third rotational pattern of Genesis, the geometry at the heart of creation. Now we
Please stop using the curtains as if you've done something relevant.
can start talking about dimensions. These wheels are some of the oldest symbols known. The only places that they've been found is on the ceilings of certain very old Egyptian tombs. They are always found in sets of 4 or 8, and nobody knows what they are. Even the most famous Egyptologists have no idea. But this is actually proof that
Wait, the most famous Egyptologists have no idea? I have no idea if they were even found on Egyptian tombs. I hear this claim made by New Age type people a lot, and I have never seen any Egyptologist even mention this. I can't say that it's false, I just suspect this is a made-up claim.
the Egyptians not only understood the flower of life, but they lived it. Today, I'm going to show you what these wheels meant, and in future lessons, we will go over the details of this unraveling. There's a lot to cover before we get there, though. For the record, the unraveling looks like this. Yeah, it's a doozy.
It looks like a giant spider?
On the walls with these wheels are drawings of 7 people with animal heads. They're called neiters, and each of them has an orangish-red oval above its head. This is called the egg of metamorphosis. The neiters are showing us a time when we go through a certain stage of resurrection, which is a rapid biological change into a different life form. Not the average type of resurrection, I know. As you can see here,
Yes, the Egyptians believed in an afterlife. This is not surprising, everyone knows this.
they're changing directions 90 degrees, and in doing so, they're changing dimensions.
Hi,
The
Athena.
dimensional levels are separated by 90 degrees.
Do you
Musical
want to
notes are
come on
separated by
off my
90 degrees.
back?
The chakras are also 90 degrees. It's a number
Oh, good. I was wondering when we'd get to chakras, because clearly we haven't offended the mostly Western systems enough yet. Let's go to Hinduism as well.
that continually appears. Probably at this point, we should get a common understanding of what dimensions are, like third dimension, fourth
Well, one of us needs an understanding of what dimensions are.
dimension, fifth dimension. What are we talking about here? Most people think of dimension in terms of time and space, the x, y, and z axis, with time becoming the fourth dimension.
That's generally what they mean if you graph something out.
This is not what we are talking about. What we're seeing as the various dimensional levels has more to do with music and harmonics than anything else. A piano has 8 white keys from C to C, which is the familiar octave, and in between there are 5 black keys. Together this creates what is called the chromatic scale, which is 13 notes, well actually 12, with the 13th being the first in the next octave. So from one C to the next is really 13 steps, not 8. This also correlates with the 7, 8, and 13 chakra system I mentioned in lesson.
Jordan, even I know that was wrong. The black keys are half steps, not a full step. And I can't remember, but there are also half steps between certain notes in each scale.
Lesson 2. Keeping that in mind, I want to show you a sine wave. Sine waves correspond with light and the electromagnetic spectrum and the vibration of sound. We're all very familiar with this. In this entire reality we're in, every single thing is based on sine waves. There are no exceptions to this except for maybe spirit.
Everything we see is based on sine waves, even a cosine wave, Jordan.
And void. Quantum physics and quantum mechanics looks at everything in the reality of one of two ways. You can look at anything, like the computer you're watching this video on, to be made up of tiny particles like atoms. Or you can forget about that idea completely and look at it as a vibration, a waveform, such as electromagnetic fields or even sound. If you look at it as
I don't even think that's an accurate representation of quantum mechanics.
atoms, the laws can be seen to fit that model. But if you look at it as waveforms, the laws can be seen to fit that model. Both of these systems come out of the flower of life, one being the one we
Nothing about quantum mechanics comes out of the flower of life. Jordan, just admit you don't know.
just looked at, fruit of life to Metatron's cube and beyond, and the other being this beautiful mess of a picture.
Does Metatron's cube transform into a gun? Or in the newer versions of the cartoons, does he transform into a tank?
Just looking at it hurts my head. Everything in this world is a waveform, or can be seen as sound. All things, your bodies, planets,
Everything is a waveform? Everything? Really?
absolutely everything, are a waveform. If you choose this particular way of looking at reality, and then superimpose that view over the reality of the harmonics of music, we can begin to talk about dimensions.
Jordan, I should have brought a face-protecting oven mitt.
The dimensional levels are nothing but different base rate wavelengths. The only difference between this dimension and any other is the length of its basic waveform. It's just like a radio set. Turn the dial, you pick up a wavelength. It's the same with dimensions. If you were to
No, you pick up a frequency, and frequencies have wavelengths.
change the wavelength of your consciousness, and in doing so, change all of your body patterns to a wavelength different from this universe, you would literally disappear out of this world and reappear in the one you were tuned in. It's been theorized
Could you please do that for us?
that the base rate wavelength that we're currently living in is 7.23 centimeters. There's a few reasons for this. In a spiritual sense,
Wait, so that's the wavelength we live in, and you're just saying probably? You haven't tested it? If you're going to call it spirit science, you need to do some experiments.
the 7.23 wavelength is Om, the Hindu sound of the universe. Maybe that's why Oming is such a powerful tool in meditation. Not only that, but if you were to take 100 people and measure the distance between their eyes, the average length is 7.23. Same with the distance from the tip of our chins to the tip of our noses,
Okay, that might be interesting, but so what?
and the distance across our palms and between our chakras. This 7
How are you measuring a distance between our chakras when chakras don't have a physical reality?
0.23 length is located throughout our bodies in various ways because we are emerged within this particular dimension. There's another reason as well. Bell Laboratories found this wavelength when they were set.
Wait, because we live in a particular dimension, we have these centimeter measurements between us? Jordan, the centimeter is an arbitrary unit of measurement. It could just as well be inches, and it's going to be a different amount of inches because inches and centimeters aren't equal. Now, I suspect you're making this number up entirely, but it looks like you were trying to find a number that kind of went what you were going for and assign a meaning to that. And I think that's fairly close to the Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Setting up the microwave system around the United States. They found static in their system because they chose a wavelength just slightly longer than 7.23 for their system. In order to get rid of the static, they did something that we as a planet are still suffering from. They upped the power 50,000 times over what we would normally need, which created a very powerful field, so that the 7.23 wavelength would not interfere. It's for those reasons that I believe 7.23 is the wavelength of our dimension. As you go up in dimensional levels, the wavelength gets shorter and shorter, with higher and higher energy. As you go down in levels, the wavelength gets longer and longer, with lower and lower energy, more and more dense.
So because of some unnamed experiment where they used a higher wavelength at higher energy that caused things we're still suffering from that you have never specified, you believe that that is why our dimension is 7.23 or has a wavelength frequency of 7.23? This is giving me a headache because I don't even know what he's trying to say.
Just as with a piano, there's a space between the notes, so that when you hit one note, there's a very definite place where the next note is. In this waveform universe we exist in, there's a very definite place where the next dimensional level exists. It's specific wavelength relative to this one. Most cultures in the cosmos have a basic understanding of this and understand how to change between dimensions. However, because of certain events that happened on Earth 13,000 years ago, we have all
Okay, Jordan, you've said most cultures in the cosmos have an understanding of this. Which cultures would those be, Jordan? Where can we meet them? Where can we absorb their wisdom? And I'm not going to accept that someone claiming to channel Thoth told you this. I want you to actually show us one of their books.
forgotten, but we're about to remember. So if we show each note in the chromatic scale as a circle, we have 13 circles. Each circle represents a white or black key, and the shaded circle at the end would be the 13th note that begins the next octave. This circle here represents the third dimension. This is where we are, and this circle next to it would be the fourth. In lesson 3, we talked about channeling, and this is typically where channeled beings are. This is also where you explore when you are astral projecting or lucid dreaming. You'll notice now that the musical system goes upwards and
Lucid dreaming does not cause you to leave your body. It's just a technique that you can use to control your dreams. That's it, Jordan. It's nothing mystical.
downwards forever, octaves over octaves over octaves. Theoretically, this is how the universe goes too, an infinite spectrum of universes in both directions going upwards and downwards forever. I mean, come on, we
Oh
got
wow,
our
I've
universe
gone
to
over
think,
an hour.
but everything in our universe, as far as we can see, well, that's just this one dimension. You may have heard people talk about 144 dimensions and how 144 relates to other spiritual subjects. This is because there are
Wait,
12
what?
weights in an octave and 12 overtones between each note. 12 times 12 equals 144 dimensional levels. To be specific, there are 12 major dimensions and 132 minor
Yes, Jordan, 12 times 12 equals 144.
dimensions within each octave, though in truth this progression probably goes on forever. The diagram we'd be looking at represents one octave. The 13th note repeats, and then there's another octave after that. I want to show you this. I was watching Ancient Aliens not long ago, and one of the natives who has communication with beings in higher dimensions told the man who was interviewing him
that they have
Oh my gosh, we all know that Ancient Aliens is an excellent source for scientific information and not something the History Channel puts on the airwaves just to get viewers.
always been here, even right here where we're sitting right now, but you just don't see them. They're in a different frequency.
and no one really got what he meant. So that's kind of a fresh perspective on that. An apocalypse is a disclosure of something hidden from the majority of mankind in an era dominated by falsehood and misconception. Today, we're going to be looking at another way that humans grow through phi. Instead of looking at phi inside the body, we're going to be looking at phi outside the body, and what it means for us in this pivotal point in human history. Do you remember the fruit of life? The first system created the
Why exactly is this point of human history pivotal?
platonic solids, which created structure throughout the universe. The second system was the basis of how vibration, sound, harmonics, music, and matter are all interrelated in all of creation. Today, we will look at the third system.
So basically, if we want to be enlightened as Jordan, we need to assign meaning to shapes, pick whatever meaning we like, and therefore we become enlightened and spiritual, even if our conclusions totally disagree with what Jordan wants us to come up with.
System, the fruit of life, will reveal itself in the process. We'll call this system the circles and squares of human consciousness. It is what the Chinese called circling the square and squaring the circle. Remember when we discussed the platonic solids in lesson 6? I showed you that all of them will sit perfectly within a sphere, each with every corner touching the sphere
Yes, you can draw a sphere around the platonic solids. There's nothing surprising about this.
perfectly. Well, there's one other shape that can do that. It's a characteristic that only one of the platonic solids have, making it special. It is the cube, which you can put every single platonic solid inside, and an edge or point will touch the inside of the cube perfectly. Through truncating the cube in different ways, you can create all of the other shapes. Because of this characteristic, it essentially means that the cube is like the father of all shapes. It is a male form, and the sphere is the mother of all shapes. It is
Oh my gosh. So the sphere and the cube got busy to make the other platonic solids? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
a female form. All levels of consciousness in the universe are integrated by a single image in sacred geometry. It is the key to space, time, and dimension, as well as consciousness itself. Each level is a geometric image or lens that spirit looks through to see the one reality, resulting in a completely different experience. In the case of humans, this image is the circle and square. This is what Leonardo da Vinci was doing when he drew this drawing, and I'm going to show you what the circle and square combination mean. If you put a circle inside a square perfectly, and then continue to put another circle and square, each with the same diameter, one radius away on all sides, going outward.
Well, Jordan, since I've never read what he had done with the notes for Vitruvian Man, I'm not going to assume that you are correct. I'm going to assume that Leonardo da Vinci is too dead for me to be putting words in his mouth, and I think you should do the same.
You get a drawing that looks like this. You'll notice that with the first circle and square, they fit perfectly within the other. This also happens with the second circle and square. However, then the squares begin penetrating circles. The male form begins interacting with the female form. Why is this important? Well, the circles and squares begin
Because this is how shapes get together, and when a circle loves a square very much, we get a triangle?
To equate the phi ratio. See, when the circumference of a circle and
Oh, okay, that was not where I thought he was going, but
the perimeter of the square are equal, this equates the phi ratio. So as you can see on this diagram, on the fourth square and the fifth circle, it begins to create the phi ratio. It's close, but not perfect. It's only a 0.6 difference. I'm measuring in radii, by the way. The inner circle has a radius of 1, so it's 2 radii across. The next
oh my gosh. Do you mean radians, Jordan? There are two ways to measure circles. You can use degrees, which is what we all start with, and then you can use radians, which are expressed in terms of pi.
is 4, and then 6, 8, 10, and so on. So the one we just looked at makes a close phi ratio, and then it moves out of sync, staying out of sync for a bit, and then bam.
Oh, he means radiuses, which is a different word. And Jordan, I know this is grammar, but for that word, the English plural is preferred.
Again, it moves into yet another phi ratio. This time, the difference is only 0.52, even closer to perfection than before. This will continue on forever. If you were to continue this drawing outwards to infinity, each time it would go into sync, drop out of sync for a few circles and squares, but then eventually hit phi again closer than it did the last time. Right now, there are three primary levels of consciousness that we're going to be talking about. They are essentially who we were, who we are, and who we will be. We'll call it the first, second, and third, so that it's easy to understand what we're talking about. The ancient Egyptians were very concerned with these three levels as well, and much of their culture was based on this information. Each of these levels has their own geometric lens too, which look like this. We'll come
I suspect Egyptian culture was not based on these three levels of information.
back to these soon. This is the first level of consciousness, and this is the third. We are on neither of these two phi levels on the circle and square chart. Where we are, the second level of consciousness, is here. We are on the fifth square relative to the sixth circle. For quite a while now, I've been saying that we're at a disharmonic level, and it's something that we're passing through as a species. Now you begin to see the bigger picture of what I meant. The reason it's disharmonic is because it does not equate a phi ratio, not even close.
So because you've drawn a shape, decided we're on the second level of consciousness, whatever that means, and because that shape in your drawing doesn't equate to the phi ratio, you've decided that we are living in an unbalanced state of consciousness. Okay.
Disharmonic levels are important because they bridge a gap between the divine, pure levels. However, when a species is here, it has to get in and get out as fast as possible, or else they will destroy themselves and everything around them incredibly quickly. You can see this happening all around the world today, because we're at the very end of it, and everything is crashing down on us. We've discussed this all before, notably in the intros of lesson 1 and 2. So the reason that we're on this circle and square combination and not the sixth square relative to some other circle is because of this. If you take the square and rotate it 45 degrees, it actually creates a bridge. It connects us from two harmonic levels of being. We're moving from one state of being to the other, this time even closer to source. This is a very exciting time for us. Oh, let me show you this too. This is how the great...
So let me guess, the way we actually get to this higher level of consciousness is to listen to you, Jordan? That kind of sounds almost cultish. All right, so I am going to end this about an hour and a half because, one, this guy's giving me a headache. And I will try to remember where we are, and maybe we'll pick it up next week if I think I can stand it.
pyramid is set up. This chamber here is called the King's Chamber. If you cut the Great Pyramid horizontally at the King's Chamber, which was the main initiation chamber, and rotate the top half 45 degrees, it makes the exact same image as our level of consciousness. There's a reason for that. The Great Pyramid is the key instrument in allowing humans to reach the third level of consciousness, both as a species and individually. In fact, that's part of the reason why the Great Pyramids were created in the first place. Let's talk more about these levels, though.
So you could spout word salad at us? That seems like a poor choice for an architect and a bad reason to make a pyramid. Are you sure? And hear me out on this one. They weren't created to be tombs and monuments to the rulers who built them.
So what Leonardo was drawing was actually the first level of consciousness. See how he hid lines in this drawing? If you complete this grid, it creates an 8x8 grid. This is the same 64 square grid found on the first level. Measuring in radii, this grid is 8x8. However, the circle has 10 radii across, so we'll call this first level an 8x10. This is where we were. The first level is the first time self-aware consciousness began. The second level has 10 squares across the large square, and a 12 radii circle, so we'll call it a 10x12. This is where we are now.
I think this sacred geometry is for nerds who liked math and who were bad at it and didn't want to do complex math.
This level is the third level, which is also called Christ consciousness. It is a 14x18. Now, there's always a reason for everything in sacred geometry. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens without a reason. Everything is connected.
I'm believing it's all connected by LSD or DMT at this point.
Out of the whole spectrum of possibilities, why did self-aware human consciousness begin when the fourth square went into harmony with the fifth circle? Well, let's overlay the fruit of life over our first level for a second. Look at that! It exactly fits the fourth square and fifth circle perfectly. Do you see the perfection of life? The fruit of life pattern was hidden beneath this pattern all along. They're precisely superimposed over the other. In a right brain way, this is how to explain why consciousness first became self-aware between the fourth square and fifth circle. This sacred image was part of the pattern. The fruit of life was complete.
Consciousness became self-aware. What? Do you mean conscious beings first became self-aware? And again, you're just fitting a shape that you know will fit inside another shape, inside another shape. It is meaningless.
Completed at the precise moment that the phi ratio first appeared, and when phi appeared, consciousness had a way to manifest in a new way. Throughout time, many scholars have tried to figure out the secret meaning behind what Leonardo meant with the Vitruvian Man drawing. He was showing us human consciousness. This is where we were, the first level. There is a man who did draw our level, though. Da Vinci was studying the works of a man named Vitruvius, who lived 1400 years before Da Vinci, hence the name Vitruvian Man. Vitruvius actually drew his own drawing of consciousness as well, and this is what it looked like. The circle and squares in this one are hidden, less obvious than the Da Vinci drawing. Regardless, they're there, and this is the current circle and square combination around our bodies. This drawing also contains the exact proportions of the Merkaba, which is an important energy system outside of the body, similar to how chakras are an energy system inside the body. This image also contains the diamond that perfectly contains the man from head to feet. This is the same image we saw in the consciousness chart, as well as the Great Pyramid. Further proof that this was what Vitruvius was demonstrating.
So, are our Merkabas powered by fossil fuels, or do they use fission reactions? Or are they thorium reactors, or are they fusion reactors?
To us when he created this image. So here we have drawings of the first two levels of consciousness. From what I know, there is no drawing of a third. If there is, it's sealed up, locked away somewhere, and is probably one of the most sacred drawings in existence. Alright.
So is there any reason why we're randomly showing people who look like they might be from the Vatican? Are you trying to imply something about the Catholics, Jordan?
I know talking about geometry all the time can be a little daunting. So many circles and ratios and everything. If this is something you want to learn more about, I'm providing the Flower of Life books and PDFs in the comments. This information is found at the very beginning of Volume 2, and much, much more. I could probably do 4 or 5 lessons about the geometries of the human body and still not run out of things to talk about. But it's there for you if you
Well, if you make stuff up, you're only limited by your creativity.
want to learn more now. For the last portion of today's lesson, we're going to talk about some recent findings in modern science.
We were supposed to learn something from this?
As we just saw in the geometry, we are currently in a disharmonic state of being, but we are just about done with it. In doing so, we are moving into a new state of being. We are transferring from the second level of consciousness to the third, also called Christ consciousness. If we look at evolution in Earth's history, we always seem to make random jumps. There are always missing links in the evolution.
No, we don't make random jumps. And this is a misunderstanding of evolution that is common, and I'm not surprised to see you use it. First of all, I see you've also forgotten Neanderthal man in this drawing. But the evolution of progress is not an actual representation of human evolution. There are a lot more missing links than are shown here, and a lot of these species are not believed to be ancestral to each other.
Chain. Scientists say that we just haven't found all the fossils, and creationists say that God did it, and therefore it's part of some divine plan. But looking at what we just learned about consciousness, does it not make sense that evolution and creationism are just two sides of the same coin?
No.
Consciousness moves through different states of being, constantly moving closer and closer to divinity, to Phi. Every time it reaches a new stage, it makes a rapid biological change into something
Why would consciousness have a goal? Evolution doesn't either.
new, like what we're doing now. This is what the ancient Egyptians called resurrection, which we mentioned in Lesson 7. So, if we're really going through an evolution of consciousness, what's happening inside of us? Surely, this would mean that there are also biological changes happening to us at our core level, right? Does modern science see any big changes that they're afraid to tell the general public because they think it will cause a panic? Short answer, yes.
Actually, there are biological changes happening within us all the time, Jordan. It's kind of necessary for us to be alive.
Long answer, we are changing. Scientists have been studying this for almost 10 to 20 years now. Several years ago in New Mexico, there was a convention of geneticists from all over the world with the main topic of discussion being DNA mutations. Scientists acknowledge that we are changing, but the end result, they do not know.
DNA mutations are a natural occurrence. Your DNA goes through, and this is an old figure, no more than 3 permanent changes per year. Sorry, no fewer than 3 permanent changes per year. It's only really a problem if some gene mutates that might cause a cancer cell or other malfunction, or if a harmful mutation gets passed on in one of the gamete cells.
Oh. Through sacred geometry, we begin to actually see where we could be going. With 12 strands activated, you have 10 times as much information available to you than you do with just 2 strands, as we do now. Not only that, but the 12 strands work in sync with the 12 chakras, providing an immense amount of energy.
Wait, what? I don't think that math is right, but I didn't catch it, so...
Into the body. We are about to become super beings, enabling us to understand and do things that currently seem paranormal, bizarre,
If we get to become super beings, I'm calling Storm.
or downright impossible. From the article The Bigger Picture by Suzanne Thorpe Clarke, we are being changed physically from carbon-based beings to crystalline-based beings.
From carbon-based beings to crystalline-based beings. Jordan, crystals are a structure and carbon is an element. That statement doesn't make sense. More importantly, a lot of crystals that you like to think are alive actually have carbon as part of their makeup.
This is interesting because I've actually heard this from various channelings now, ascension and transformation into crystalline at our core. First the psychics were telling us this, and now we have science backing it up. What we
No, we don't.
know for sure is that we are going through a shift. In almost every ancient text and Bible, it speaks about a great shift and awakening. The Bible speaks about the coming of Christ.
You mean a book written by people who were not happy about being part of the Roman Empire, who looked forward to a time when some supernatural force would overthrow the Roman Empire? We're talking about some form of great transition? What a surprising statement, Jordan.
This is interesting actually, because Christ is the name of the third level of consciousness. I didn't just make that up. We are moving into Christ consciousness, which means not that Jesus is going to show up with a big "Hey!"
That is an interesting picture, and I'm pretty sure it's a Mormon one. So I wonder where he got it from.
But we are actually moving into the level of conscious understanding that Jesus had. It is the coming of Christ through the human species. So higher strands of DNA, what does this really mean? The portions of the DNA chain that science has presently identified as the double helix represents only the surface portions of the chemical, elemental, and electrical components of the active DNA strands. Science has yet to understand the multidimensional spectra of DNA manifestation, though we are beginning to remember. The human DNA imprint will always appear from external analysis as a 2-strand double helix configuration in 3 dimensions. What is not understood is that within the double helix there are, and will be progressively more, additional double helix strands which fuse together.
What?
As our understanding evolves into the multidimensional spectra, the understanding of the structure and function of DNA will progressively advance. A team of Russian researchers working with DNA started a project to progressively learn more about DNA by combining forces with linguists, and have dived into the unknown of the 90%
I think he meant linguists.
of junk DNA, which we currently embody.
The term junk DNA is no longer in favor, and it has been replaced with non-coding DNA. Are you going to tell me DNA is like a computer code? Because I'm waiting for that one.
Their findings are evolutionary. According to them, our DNA is not only responsible for the construction of our body, but is also used as data storage and in communication. They learned that the 90
Oh my gosh. This is one of those things where he's actually kind of right, but it's something I've frequently seen creationists do as well. DNA computing does use DNA as data storage, but that does not mean DNA is data unless you're using an informatics analogy. DNA can be used as data in DNA computing systems, which are systems that we build.
90% of DNA follows the same rules as all of our human language. The way that sentences, paragraphs, and chapters work in a book is the same way that our DNA works. This is the first double helix strand.
Wait, what?
The one that Western science looks at, which is basically like a sentence of DNA. However, if you step back and see the bigger picture, you begin to see the paragraph. Stepping back further and you see the chapter, and so on.
So I see a bunch of football shapes?
These larger and larger strands span through the different frequencies of reality, the different dimensions, which makes them harder to find in our modern science. Western science, instead of
Oh, so you mean they're not actually there and you're making this up. Got it.
looking at DNA like this, we're cutting out pieces of DNA from here and adding them over here, which is similar to picking out words in certain sentences and putting them with other words in other sentences to see if they fit together and can make a new energy, a new idea. This is the nature of our junk DNA, of which Western science just didn't understand for the longest of times. The DNA isn't junk, it's just misunderstood, and also not as used right now because of our dense level of consciousness. However,
Our dense level of consciousness? What?
We are beginning to activate and reawaken our DNA through our ever-expanding consciousness and our desire to know more. The very awareness of this DNA is what is activating it, awareness of our higher selves and our connection to the all and the interconnectedness to each other. We are directly connected to the earth as well, and exist as a part of it, kind of like a child in its mother's womb.
Unfortunately, the Earth is about to be destroyed to make way for a hyperspace bypass.
If anything happens to the mother, it creates an energetic imprint that affects the child. The earth is our mother, hence the name Mother Earth. Our morphogenetic field exists as a part of her larger morphogenetic field of the earth. If something happens to the earth's energetic grid, then we inherit these problems into our own grid. Our energetic anatomy is exactly like the earth's, with chakras, meridians, axiotonal lines, and DNA. If something
The Earth has DNA, Jordan. Well, certainly DNA exists on Earth, but planets do not have a genetic code. They are planets.
happens to the planet's grid, then that affects every person's DNA on the planet. We are at a very important point in history right now, because we are remembering how to regenerate our original organic imprint for health. We don't even need science and fancy equipment to do this. We're just required to learn how to use what we came here with.
So basically, follow all things Jordan says, and you gain superpowers. I know there's another religion that claims this, Jordan, and it's not convincing from them either.
By moving into a space of love and light, opening and living from the heart, and living in a place of emotional stability and health, you can once again reactivate your light body, and in doing so, reconnect with the higher frequencies of your being. Energetic blockages will reveal
And then if I land on LV-426, they're going to listen to me when I tell them not to break quarantine?
themselves as problems in your own life. Depression, anxiety, temper rages, or personal problems in your life, which are causing stuckness or driving you down a path of chaos or disruption, are
Well, the only thing I can think that caused me to go down a path of chaos and destruction or anything close to it tonight was the decision to cover this video.
also energetic blockages. The Institute of Heart Math has shown that generating sustained positive
The Institute of Heart Math?
emotions facilitates a body-wide shift to a specific scientifically measurable state called psychophysiological coherence. Let's break this down. Psycho comes from psychological, which means mental and emotions, and physiological means body. Coherence is systematic or logical connection or harmony.
Jordan, I'm going to assume most of my audience was smart enough to understand what those words mean.
Altogether, it means a harmony of both body, mind, and emotional functions. If you're familiar with
The only times I gave definitions when I was thought that you were misusing them.
the four elements, you know that earth is the physical, so body, air is mental, mind, water is emotions, and fire is spirit. Heart math has scientifically shown now that positive and healthy emotions bring 3 of those elements into coherence, and although they don't look at the spiritual aspect, I don't doubt that the fire element also comes into harmony. In an experiment done
The spirit element was spirit, not fire.
at the Institute, they hooked up scanners to an individual who was subjected to very chaotic emotions.
Because a lot of people really forget that there really were 5 elements in the classical model, but just 4 that most people talked about, because spirit was also one.
300 seconds, they measured the respiration, heart rate variability, and blood pressure rhythm. After this time, the individual on the scanners did a technique on himself which they have dubbed the Heart Math Quick Coherence Technique, which activated a feeling of love and appreciation. Instantly, all 3 of the rhythms came into entrainment and harmony with each other, and stayed in harmony for the remainder of the experiment.
And that is a good thing or a bad thing.
One important note to stress is that cohesion is not relaxation. The process of relaxation is a low energy state in which the individual rests both body and mind, typically disengaging from cognitive and emotional processes. In contrast, coherence is experienced as a calm and balanced, yet energized and responsive state of being that is optimal for mental acuity, focus, problem solving, and decision making, as well as the physical activity and coordination. So coherence is the natural state you want to be in all the time, unless you're relaxing. That's good too. So how does one get into the state of cohesion? Breathing. Your breath is intimately connected to your heart rate and your heart in general. And if you ever find yourself in a very chaotic mental state, take a few seconds to step back of what's causing the chaos and focus on your breath. Take long and deep breaths. The Institute of Heart Math doesn't put too much focus into particular breathing techniques, but they put an emphasis on using your breath as well as positive and loving emotions to bring you back into a state of cohesion. They say that it's not super necessary to put focus on your breath all the time, but it is very helpful to bring yourself out of chaos and back into alignment. From a spiritual perspective, and if you're working towards that, breath is very important. However, breath is another huge topic, and I personally recommend focusing on your breath during meditations. Focusing on breathing and your heart is a beautiful way to move into a silent space during meditation and deeper into yourself, all while sustaining the same healthy emotions. Now, throughout ancient history, across many, many religions and belief systems, the heart was always considered a center of the being, the source of spiritual wisdom and insight, thought, emotion, and connection to the divine. The ancient Egyptians believed that all thought and life was done from the heart, which is why they threw away the brain after the pharaoh died, but they left the heart in the body. They felt that the being would need it in the next life, so they left it there, but the brain was useless.
Yes, they were wrong about what the brain did. That is not a surprise. I don't know when exactly we discovered what the brain did, but I'm sure even the ancient Egyptians knew that if you shot someone in the head, they would die.
Western scientific thought places the heart as just a pump. However, in the last several decades, science has begun to go full circle in realizing and understanding what these ancient civilizations knew and taught. In the field of neurocardiology, scientists have discovered that the heart possesses its own intrinsic nervous system.
A nervous system is not a brain, Jordan. Starfish, for example, have a central nervous system. They do not have brains. Which, by the way, is why all starfish on SpongeBob SquarePants are stupid.
Network of brain cells with over 40,000 neurons. This gives the heart the ability to independently sense and process information, and make decisions, even demonstrate a type of learning and memory. In a simplified sense, you can think with your
I don't think that's true. But you're not going to give us any sources so we can check this out for ourselves.
heart. The heart is truly an intelligent system. The heart also has found to be a hormone gland, manufacturing and secreting numerous hormones and neurotransmitters that profoundly affect the brain and body function. Among these hormones is one called oxytocin, well known as the love or bonding hormone, bringing things together. Science is also beginning to understand that the electromagnetic field around the heart has a powerful effect on not just the human body, but others around you as well. Research has also shown that the heart is the key component of the emotional system. Science now understands that the heart not only responds to emotions, but the signals it sends out dramatically affects the quality of the emotional experience from moment to moment. And also that our heart plays a key role in accessing our intuition. In school, we've been taught that the heart is constantly responding to orders sent from the brain. But what's less commonly talked about is that the brain receives even more orders from the heart. We've been doing it backwards. Moreover, these signals have a significant effect on brain function, influencing emotional processes as well as higher cognitive faculties such as attention, perception, memory, and problem solving. Guide yourself from your heart, not from your brain. When you allow your negative emotions to get to you, you disconnect from your ability to think clearly, remember things, learn lessons, reason, and make effective decisions, which explains why often we act impulsively and unwisely under stress. The heart's signal has a profound effect on the brain during positive and negative emotions. Live in your heart, for the heart is the center of unity consciousness, where the brain is the center of duality consciousness. You can see that right in how they're made. The brain has the two hemispheres. The heart is a place of unity. Since we fell in consciousness, we moved from heart
Doesn't the heart have 4 chambers?
consciousness and into our brains. And all decisions were made from the brain. In doing so, we became polarized and lost our connections to the universal consciousness called unity. This shift in consciousness we are experiencing now is a movement from the brain and back into the heart, where we will once again know and understand the universe and unconditional love.
Yes. Then you go into the Unity at the end of Starfield, you get the Starborn ship, and then you go off and do it all over again. Oh, wait, you're not talking about Starfield, are you?
For everyone and all things, regardless of who they are or what damage they've done to themselves or others. And this is why the heart is so important right now. Live in your heart. It is the gateway to the divine. The torus is a very fundamental part of nature. So fundamental, in fact, that science is now seeing that everything moves through this form in one way or another, including ourselves. Very simply, the torus is a self-organizing system that all comes together at a space of unity and expands its energy out all around itself until it returns back to that original space in the center, and will continue to do it again. In quantum physics, mathematics, and generally all forms of science, this geometry really begins to bridge the gap between understanding how sacred geometry
Jordan, how many sciences have you actually studied? And beyond that, how many of you studied deeply? Now, I can guarantee you very little of what you've talked about today has any connection to the computer science I've studied. The closest you've come is going through the powers of 2, which are very much related to computer science. You've misunderstood what binary sequences are. You've misunderstood what exponential sequences are, which is what you actually meant. You've made a lot of bizarre claims that don't connect to anything. So it seems that we can't really go through a lot of logical fallacies on this one, because most of it just isn't connected to anything in reality. What we have are a bunch of meaningless phrases that you've tried to assign post hoc meaning to. So there is a word for that. It's called word salad. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to return to this video next week. Honestly, this gave me kind of a headache because trying to understand what Jordan is saying is just painful. You think he might be onto something at some points, but then he goes off and says something completely unconnected to whatever point he was trying to bring up. This is a little longer than most of my videos of this sort have been. I usually try to keep them to an hour or less. So I thank you for sticking with me, for those of you who have been here. If you would like to like the video, please do so. Remember to subscribe. If you subscribe, ring that notification bell. Now, go out and write some code.